Welcome back to the deep dive. If you are a builder, a learner, or just someone who's really curious about how great digital products go from, a sketch on a napkin to a real piece of software, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we are getting into the machinery of product development, the part that sits right between that grand vision and the daily sprint.
Right.
We're talking about that transition point. It's often the biggest point of friction in a lot of companies. Moving from strategy, the big why and what, to execution.
The how.
The how, exactly. It's that moment where a brilliant strategic idea can just get completely tangled up in messy, poorly defined work.
Happens all the time.
All the time. So our mission today is to give you a real practical shortcut to understanding how that translation is supposed to work. We've been looking through a whole stack of materials on this. They detail exactly how that high-level blueprint, the product requirements document, or PRD, gets systematically transformed into the engine of an agile team, which is the product backlog. We're going to map that whole journey step by step. And we're going to focus really hard on those in-between stages. The epics, the user stories, and of course, the all-important acceptance criteria.
Yeah.
This is basically the roadmap for turning outcomes into actual tasks.
And that word you used, translation, that is absolutely the key. When we're looking at this whole flow of documentation, what we're really talking about is this core concept of progressive elaboration.
Progressive elaboration.
Yeah, it's not a single event. It's not a handoff. It's a continuous process. Think of it like you're zooming in on a Google map.
Okay.
The PRD, that's the satellite view of the whole continent. It tells you generally where you want to end up.
Yeah.
Then as you elaborate, you zoom in. You see the city, then the neighborhood.
And finally, the street address.
Exactly. Each zoom level adds just enough detail, right when you need it, just in time. And if you fail at that process, if you get progressive elaboration wrong, you absolutely fail at maximizing product value.
So you could end up building the wrong thing, but just very, very efficiently.
That is the ultimate product management nightmare. You've hit the nail on the head.
Okay, that's a perfect way to frame this. So let's set the stage. What are the big insights you're walking away with after this? Well, first, you are going to master the definitive difference between the strategic PRD and the tactical product backlog. Seriously, this distinction is the bedrock of almost every modern product role.
It is.
Second, we're going to give you the complete checklist for a perfect unit of work. We're talking the structure of a perfect user story, the criteria for what makes it good. And third, we'll arm you with that insider knowledge to avoid the most common pitfalls that sink really brilliant product teams. Things like bad criteria or misplaced accountability.
All the classic mistakes.
All the classics. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start where every product journey should, right at the beginning, with the product requirements document.
It's a PRD.
The PRD. Now, for anyone coming from an older methodology, that term might conjure up these images of a massive shelf-bending document, a huge binder.
The doorstop.
The doorstop, exactly. But in a modern agile context, that's changed dramatically. Fundamentally, a PRD still describes what the product or feature should do and, crucially, why. It's all about defining the scope and the success criteria, both from the user's view and for the business. It's the Genesis document.
And that leads us right to the main insight from the material here, which is what they call the agile twist on the PRD.
Right.
Historically, in waterfall methodologies, that PRD was the contract. It was set in stone. Teams would spend 6 months writing this incredibly detailed fixed specification.
And for a release that was 18 months away.
18 months away, yeah. And the painful truth was that by the time you shipped, the market had changed, the technology had shifted, or your initial assumptions were just plain wrong. The cost of making a change was, it was astronomical.
So it was obsolete before it was even built.
Pretty much. So the Agile PRD is really defined by what it is not. And that's the key. It is not a fixed contract.
Oh.
That is crucial. It is instead a living strategic input. It's meant to be lighter. It focuses on the desired outcomes, like the change in user behavior you want to see, not on prescribing the detailed technical solutions.
So it's not telling the engineers how to build the database or which algorithm to use?
No, absolutely not. Its role is to be a high-level input. It sets the strategic direction, the North Star, but it leaves the day-to-day execution and the technical decisions to the development team. It aligns everyone, but it doesn't handcuff them.
That makes so much sense. It's like the difference between telling a chef what dish you want versus telling them exactly how to chop the onions and what temperature to set the oven to.
Perfect analogy. You're hiring them for their expertise, let them use it.
So if it's lighter and more outcome-focused, what are the essential ingredients? The sources we looked at, pulling from structures used by places like Atlassian, they detail 6 core areas that really have to be in a solid PRD. The first one is the problem statement. Simple enough, right? If you can't state the pain point you're solving in one clear paragraph, you probably don't have enough focus.
You're not ready to build.
You're not ready. Second, you have to define the objectives and success metrics. And this is where people can fall into a trap, right? The vanity metrics trap.
Oh, absolutely. Increase logins.
Right. An objective isn't increase logins. A good objective is something like reduce the number of user support tickets related to payment errors by 25%. That's measurable.
Yes. That metric links directly back to solving a real, tangible problem. The success metrics, they're the accountability layer for your entire strategy. They're the target on the wall.
And from there, the PRD has to pivot to the customer.
Right. Which brings us to number 3, users and personas. Who are we actually building this for? If you have 2 different user types, say an admin and a general end user, their needs will be totally different. The PRD has to detail both.
Which leads to number 4, the user needs or use cases. These are the key scenarios. For an e-commerce site, a core use case would be search for a product or complete the checkout.
The jobs to be done.
Exactly.
And number 5 is where you get into strategic risk management. This is the assumptions and constraints.
So the non-negotiable.
The non-negotiables, yeah. A constraint could be a legal regulation or an architectural one like we have to use the existing payment API. An assumption might be that all our users are on mobile or that our main competitor isn't going to release a similar feature for 6 months.
And you have to call those out.
You have to call them out. It establishes boundaries and it identifies your biggest risks right up front.
And finally, number 6, which might be my favorite, the out-of-scope items. This is so critical for managing expectations and stopping scope creep.
It's a lifesaver.
It is. If we're building a subscription management feature, we have to state very clearly that integration with PayPal is out of scope for this first release. That clarity saves hundreds of hours of arguments later on. It just draws a line in the sand.
A very necessary line.
So all of this brings us to that crucial distinction, what the sources call the exam favorite, the difference between the PRD and the product backlog. They're completely different things, serving totally different purposes.
Yeah, let's just lay them out side by side. It makes it so clear. The PRD is strategic.
Right. It's about market position, business value.
And the backlog is tactical. It's about the immediate work that needs to get done.
This week's work.
Exactly. So the PRD describes needs, the user's needs, the business's needs. The backlog, on the other hand, it just lists work, the specific tasks and steps to fulfill those needs.
Okay, so needs versus work.
And then there's the focus. The PRD is outcome-focused. It asks questions like, did we reduce support tickets? Did we increase revenue?
Big picture stuff.
The big picture. The backlog is task-focused. It asks, did we build the button? Did we test the API endpoint?
Got it. And what about the level of detail?
Well, the PRD is high level. It's that satellite view we talked about. The backlog has to be detailed and prioritized. It's the turn-by-turn GPS directions for the team.
And the most important difference, I think, is about how they're maintained. The PRD is, static-ish. It evolves, sure, but its core mission might be stable for 6 or 12 months.
Right.
But the backlog is continuously refined. It has to be dynamic. It changes not just sprint to sprint, but sometimes day to day as the team learns and adjusts. And that dynamic nature is why the Scrum Guide, the 2020 version, defines the product backlog not as a fixed document, but as an emergent, ordered list of what is needed to improve the product.
And you cannot overstate that word, emergent. It means the backlog is born from the PRD, but it doesn't just appear fully formed on day one.
And it grows.
It emerges and clarifies over time as the team does the work. And that systematic creation of detail, well, that's what progressive elaboration is all about.
Okay, so let's trace that path. How do we actually take that high-level strategic PRD and turn it into items small enough for a developer to pick up, finish, and test inside a single 2-week sprint?
This is the funnel.
This is the funnel. Our sources lay out a 6-step sequence that really dictates this translation from strategy into deliverable units.
Okay.
Step 1. The PRD defines the big problems, the users, and the outcomes we want. Step 2. Those big outcomes get grouped into epics. Step 3. The epics are then systematically split into major functional areas we call features. 4. Those features are broken down into the fundamental unit of value, the user story. 5. The stories are then made actionable and testable by adding acceptance criteria. And finally, 6. These complete detailed stories are prioritized, estimated, and continuously refined into the product backlog, ready for the team to pull from.
So the first major step down that funnel is the epic. If the PRD is the why, the epic is a major what? A huge chunk of the product we're building.
And it's big.
It is, by definition, a massive body of work. It has to deliver a meaningful business outcome, and here's the key part. It cannot be completed in one sprint. Most epics take months of work.
So it's a container.
It's essentially a large container for related work, and it ties all that work directly back to a major goal from the PRD. So let's use that practical example. If a PRD goal is improve customer lifetime value by ensuring transparency and ease of payment management, that would lead you to an epic called simply subscription management.
Right.
That epic then provides the context for dozens of smaller items, building the dashboard, handling cancellations, updating payment methods, all of it. It's the big theme.
And it's worth noting, for anyone really focused on strict Scrum methodology, epics aren't technically one of the 3 core Scrum artifacts.
That's right. They're not in the Scrum Guide.
No, but they are universally used in Jira, Azure DevOps, pretty much every modern Agile tool, because you need them to organize a large-scale product roadmap. They let you track strategic progress without getting lost in the weeds of every single daily story.
Couldn't do it without them, really.
So let's talk about that middle step you mentioned, the feature. Why do we need that layer between an epic and a story?
That's a great question. The feature often represents a single, shippable, major functional component of the epic. Think of it like a milestone within that larger theme.
Okay, a milestone.
Exactly. It usually maps to something you can actually name and potentially release on its own. It's an integrated piece of functionality.
So if the epic is subscription management,
The features might be things like billing history viewer, payment method updater, and the cancellation workflow. Each one is a distinct piece of value.
and they're still too big for one sprint.
Still too big for a single sprint, usually, but they're much smaller than the epic, and they help the product owner organize the release plan. It's that critical middle ground of detail.
Okay, so we've gone from the PRD's outcome to the multi-month theme, the epic, subscription management, and then we've segmented that into shippable milestones like the feature, cancellation workflow. Now we get to the core unit of work,
The user story.
the user story. And if the feature is a chapter in the book, the user story is a single sentence. It's the smallest functional unit that still delivers some kind of value.
And it has to be user value.
It has to be. Stories must always focus on user value, not just the technical task underneath. The user's goal is the driving force.
And this brings us to that critical standard agile format. I mean, if you memorize one thing about structure from this whole deep dive, it should be this. As a user, I want capability. So that benefit.
The classic format.
It's classic for a reason. The power isn't just the structure, it's that mandatory third part. So that benefit,
the why.
the why. It forces the product owner to constantly trace the work back to the business value or the user goal from the PRD. If you can't articulate the benefit, that story is either totally unnecessary or it's just a technical task dressing up like a story. That benefit clause. It's the tether that keeps you connected to the strategy.
Okay, so let's see how that cancellation workflow feature decomposes into specific stories using that format.
Let's do it.
The feature itself is too big for a sprint, but we can generate a bunch of small, valuable stories from it. The first one could be, as a user, I want to access the cancellation page from my main account dashboard so that I can easily initiate the process.
Simple, clear, valuable.
Right. A second one, as a user, I want to receive a prompt asking why I am canceling so that the company can gather necessary feedback. And the third, the real core of it. As a user, I want a single confirm cancellation button on the final page so that I can stop my subscription immediately.
See, each one is bite-sized.
Totally. Bite-sized, independent, and clearly linked back to that user need from the larger epic and feature.
And this is where we need to sound the red flag alert. This is the moment where teams consistently go wrong.
Okay.
We see so many backlogs that are just polluted with technical tasks disguised as stories. If you see items like build API endpoint for subscription data, or refactor database table for payment records, or create testing environment,
You've got a problem.
you have a huge problem. Those are necessary technical steps, sure, but they are not user stories. They deliver zero discernible value to the end user on their own.
So what do you do with them?
They should be documented as subtasks within a properly formatted user story. The story, as a user, I want to cancel a subscription, will have subtasks. 1, build the API endpoint. 2, update the database. 3, write the unit tests.
Ah, so the technical work serves the user value, not the other way around.
Precisely. This ensures that the product owner is always prioritizing based on value, not on technical implementation details. If the PO starts prioritizing build API, they've lost the plot.
So we've got the right format for a user story. But a good format, that alone doesn't guarantee quality or efficiency, right? A badly written story, even with the as a user structure, can still completely derail a sprint.
Absolutely. You need a quality checklist.
And this is where we bring in the industry standard criteria for writing good user stories. It's often called the Einvest model. This is the non-negotiable quality gate that makes sure stories are valuable, manageable, and actually ready to be worked on.
The Einvest model is a framework designed to just identify and eliminate ambiguity and risk before the development team starts writing code. And we should go through it letter by letter, because the nuance of each one is really critical to this whole idea of progressive elaboration.
Okay, let's do it.
I stands for independent. This means the story should be self-contained. It shouldn't depend on another story being finished first.
Why is that so important?
Because dependencies are the enemy of agility. They destroy it. If story A depends on B, which depends on C, the team can't work in parallel. They're just stuck waiting.
And if story B hits a roadblock?
The whole train stops. The entire downstream chain of work is blocked. Writing independent stories lets the product owner change priorities on the fly without causing a total logistical collapse.
Can you give me a concrete example of that?
Sure. Instead of writing two dependent stories, like one, as a user, I want to validate my address, and two, as a user, I want to purchase after address validation, a better way is to merge them into one story. Or, even better, make sure the purchase story can handle the validation internally without needing the other one to be shipped first.
Independence is flexibility.
Maximum flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next up is N for negotiable.
Yeah.
This goes right back to the spirit of Agile. The story is not a fixed contract handed down from the heavens.
It's an invitation to a conversation.
That's the perfect way to put it. The story is a placeholder for a discussion between the product owner and the developers. The PO brings the what and the why, and the development team brings their expertise on the how.
Mm-hmm.
If the team says, hey, we can do this in a much simpler way that's faster and gives you 90% of the benefit, the PO has to be willing to negotiate the details of that story.
Makes sense. Okay, then we have V.
V is for valuable. If the story isn't valuable to the customer or the business, it's just waste. It's organizational churn. Every single story has to pass this test, and it has to link back to the PRD objectives.
So if you look at your backlog and half the items are just internal maintenance tasks without a clear so that benefit.
You've probably lost sight of what your customers actually care about.
Right. Okay, E.
E is for estimable. A story has to be clear enough for the development team to reliably estimate its size, whether these story points, t-shirt sizes, whatever.
And if they can't?
If a team looks at a story and says, we have no idea how long this will take, it fails the E test. It's either too vague, way too big, or it needs a dedicated research story before it can be estimated. An unestimable story is a massive risk to your sprint plan.
Got it. Next up, S for small.
A good story should be small enough to be completed within a single sprint, ideally in just a few days. Small stories mean you're delivering value continuously and you're getting rapid feedback.
And if a story is always taking the full 2 weeks?
It's probably too big. And when a story is too big, it accumulates complexity, which leads to testing failures and scope creep. The fix is simple. Just break it down into even smaller, independent units.
Okay, and that brings us to the last letter, T.
T for testable. This is the bridge to our next big topic. If you can't test a story, you can't prove that it's done.
Right.
And testability requires clear, objective criteria that verify you've delivered what you promised. Without that, the product owner is just taking the team's word for it, which is the exact opposite of a structured, value-driven process.
And testability leads us directly to the definition of done, which is acceptance criteria, or AC.
Exactly.
So if the user story defines the need, the acceptance criteria define the precise conditions of satisfaction. They tell everyone, the developer, the QA tester, the product owner, exactly when that story is finished and working correctly.
The whole purpose of AC is clarity and risk mitigation. First, they remove ambiguity. They get rid of that whole, oh, I thought you meant this problem.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. Second, they explicitly enable testing. The criteria literally become the test cases that the QA team will use. And third, they directly support the definition of done, which is the team's overall quality standard for the entire product increment.
And this has to be a collaborative effort.
It has to be. Acceptance criteria aren't just dictated by the product owner. The PO provides the desired outcome, the business logic, but the criteria are hammered out and defined collaboratively with the developers.
Which ensures they're not just valuable, but also technically feasible.
And achievable within the sprint.
So what are the common formats for AC? We saw two main ones in the materials. The first is just simple bullet points. Clean, easy to read.
Workhorse.
The workhorse, yeah. The second, which is often used by more advanced teams who integrate testing really early, is the gherkin format, the whole given, when, then structure.
And that gherkin format, it's central to something called behavior-driven development, or BDD. It deserves a closer look because the clarity it provides is just. It's unparalleled. It turns your criteria into executable specifications.
Okay, so let's use our cancellation story as an example again. As a user, I want to cancel a subscription so that I stop future charges. How would that look in Gherkin?
Okay, so you'd structure it like this. You'd have a scenario name, like scenario, successful subscription cancellation. Then you start with the setup. Given I am a user with an active monthly subscription, and I navigate to the My Subscriptions page.
So that's the starting state.
That's the context. Then comes the action. When I click the Cancel Subscription button, and I confirm the cancellation reason.
And finally, the results.
The verifiable results, yep. Then my subscription status changes immediately to pending cancellation. And I'm shown a confirmation message. Your subscription will end on date, and I receive a cancellation confirmation email.
Wow. What's so powerful about that is how it separates the setup, the given, the action, the when, and the results, the then.
Exactly.
It makes it incredibly easy for both a non-technical product owner and an automated testing tool to understand precisely what success is supposed to look like.
Compare that to a vague bullet point like cancellation works.
Right. There's no comparison. The Gherkin specification leaves zero room for misinterpretation. It's the ultimate expression of the testable part of iInvest, and it's the essence of making work concrete.
So we've laid out the documents, the process. Now we have to talk about the people. Because accountability is the scaffolding that holds this entire structure together.
And in Scrum, the roles are very sharply defined.
They are. And misassigning accountability is, I would say, a primary driver of organizational failure.
So who owns what in this funnel?
Let's clarify it. The strategic direction, the PRD, that's owned by the product manager or the product owner. The single most important list, the product backlog, is the sole responsibility of the product owner.
And what about the individual stories and criteria?
The user stories are owned by the PO, but the acceptance criteria. That's a collaborative ownership between the product owner and the developers.
Let's dig into that for a second. Why is the PO's accountability for the product backlog so singular? Why can't they delegate that?
Because the 2020 Scrum Guide is crystal clear on this. The product owner is singularly accountable for maximizing the value of the product that results from the work of the development team.
And the backlog is how they do that.
The backlog is the mechanism through which they execute that accountability. They decide the order. They decide what's most valuable. If the PO delegates backlog ordering to the development team or a project manager, they are functionally abdicating their core duty.
And that leads us to the ongoing maintenance process, right? Backlog refinement, sometimes called grooming.
Yeah. The product backlog isn't static. It needs constant attention to keep it ready for future sprints. And this process, this is where those original PRD assumptions get pressure tested against the reality of the market and the team's capabilities.
And it's a significant time commitment. The materials note it typically takes up about 10% of the development team's capacity during a sprint.
And that's not wasted time. It's dedicated preparation time. The goal is to make sure that the team always has enough ready, detailed, estimable work queued up for the next sprint or two.
So what happens during refinement?
The collaboration is intense. This is where epics and features get broken down into those smaller iInvest compliance stories. The acceptance criteria are debated, clarified, and that often leads to discovering technical complexities or edge cases that nobody thought about during the high-level PRD phase.
And estimates are added, priorities adjusted.
Exactly. Priorities get shifted based on the latest market data or feedback from the last feature you shipped.
And the insight there is the dynamic. The product owner brings the why, the priority, based on value from the PRD. The developers bring the how, the technical feasibility, the estimate of effort.
And without that 10% refinement time, the stories that go into the next sprint are just vague, unestimated, and full of risk. Refinement is the moment where the strategic PRD gets fully translated into tactical, execution-ready work.
Okay, so let's wrap this all up by giving everyone the learner's shortcut, the list of common traps and mistakes. Because knowing the process is one thing.
But knowing where teams consistently fail is another level of insight.
So what's the first major trap?
It's the one we mentioned at the start. Treating the PRD as a fixed contract. This mentality guarantees you will build the wrong product. Agile is built on learning. New information should allow you to evolve your requirements.
So if the PO treats the PRD like it's sacred text.
They sacrifice agility and responsiveness for the illusion of control. It's a disaster waiting to happen.
Okay, trap number 2.
The chronic issue. Writing technical tasks as user stories. We've seen entire quarters get wasted because a backlog was 80%. Build API or update libraries.
Yeah.
The product owner completely loses sight of the customer value.
And they end up prioritizing technical debt over user needs.
Exactly, which alienates the very customers you were trying to serve.
Okay, third big mistake.
Adding acceptance criteria after development has already started. This is just reactive product management. AC must be defined as part of the readiness stage before a story ever enters a sprint.
Because if the team starts coding without knowing what done looks like.
They're just building on assumptions, which inevitably leads to rework, testing failures, and really frustrated developers. AC ensures the work is done right the first time.
Right, number 4. This links back to accountability.
It does. The trap of the product owner delegating backlog ownership. The PO can ask for help, sure. They can ask developers to write some stories or help with estimates. But the final ordered list is their responsibility.
Because if the backlog gets ordered by technical complexity instead of customer value.
Then the product will be optimized for technical neatness, not for success in the market.
And the final insidious mistake.
This one is especially tempting for new product managers. It's over-detailing too early. We call it big design up front,
Right.
or BDUF.
Right.
Yes, the PRD needs strategy. But detailing every single acceptance criterion for every story for the next 5 releases is just pure waste.
Because things will change.
They're almost guaranteed to be obsolete or need massive rework by the time you get to them. Progressive elaboration means you only detail the work to the point of ready right before you need it. It keeps the detail just in time and maximizes your efficiency.
Okay, that was a really methodical, systematic exploration of this whole product journey. Let's try to bring it full circle. The shift from that high-level PRD to the detailed product backlog, it's not just a data entry process. It's this sophisticated, structured process of progressive elaboration.
Right.
It's the mechanism that makes sure every small, testable chunk of work that a development team commits to is directly aligned with the big strategic objectives you laid out in that initial blueprint. It's how you build the right thing effectively.
And that entire structure, it relies so heavily on a dynamic relationship, which brings me to our final provocation for you to think about. We spent a lot of time emphasizing the N in invest, that good stories have to be negotiable. So if stories are truly negotiable, meaning the scope or the technical approach can change based on developer input or new learnings during the sprint,
Right.
how does a product owner ensure that in the middle of all those necessary trade-offs and priority shifts, the essential business outcome that was defined way back in the high-level PRD is actually still met?
Oh, that's a great question.
This negotiation, it inherently creates a dynamic tension between the PO, who owns the why, and the development team, who owns the how. So the question to mull over is, how do the most effective teams manage that tension to continuously deliver maximum value without compromising either the strategy or the engineering quality? That's the real organizational challenge that builds on all the technical frameworks we talked about today.
A deep and fascinating challenge. That dynamic between the why and the how, that's where true product leadership really emerges. Thank you for diving deep with us. We hope you feel thoroughly equipped to navigate and optimize the waters of product strategy and execution in your own work. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.